In this video, we'll be taking a look into one of the more stranger mysteries of the 80s, one of the largest broadcast hacks that disturbed hundreds of thousands of viewers. Let's take a look at the Max Headroom hijacking. So who was Max Headroom? In 1984, a movie premiered on TV called Max Headroom, 20 minutes into the future. The movie was a cyberpunk film. It had your dystopian city, hackers, technology, AI. This would be the introduction of Max Headroom, the world's first computer-generated TV host. The character was a big hit and quickly had a grasp on the 80s pop culture. Coca-Cola famously used him as a pitchman for their product New Coke.
This is my guest. I heard you were big time in the old pop biz. Well, I'm going to take that as a no comment. So, nitty-gritty time. What I'm talking about, and you're not, is that more people prefer the new refreshing taste of Coke over Pepsi. Sweating? It's true. More people are, as we Cokeologists say, catching the wave. Catch it if you can. Catch the wave. Coke.
Now, Max Headroom was played by an actor named Matt Fewer, and in 1987 he got his own show called The Max Headroom Show. It was set in a dystopian future where TV networks controlled the world. Max was a gritty TV newscaster in an industry that blended news and entertainment. Now, I said TV networks control the world, but really it was corporations who were having the networks pump out advertisements. The corporations had the networks put something out called a blip, which was a 30-second advertisement condensed down into 3 seconds. Is this starting to sound familiar? Because remember, this was supposed to be a fictional TV show, a parody of a dark dystopian future. And in this fictional universe, they're blending news and entertainment, pushing out ads. It's just supposed to be a parody in a fictional show. In the first episode of the TV show, we had a character named Edison Carter who was a star reporter for a fictional network 23. He was known to uncover secrets, sometimes secrets that the network wanted to stay buried. Eventually, he goes too far and upsets the network, and the next thing you know, he has a motorcycle accident. Definitely not planned by a network. On his way into the hospital, he saw a sign that read, Max Headroom, 2.3 meters. In the parking garage he was being transported through before he slipped into a coma. This would be the last thing he saw and will be the first thing he remembers. While he was in his coma, Network 23 got a hold of him and took his brain. They uploaded it into an AI hoping to recreate their star reporter in virtual format. It ended up not working out. It was too glitchy, so they just tossed out the drive his personality was saved on. Pirate broadcasters found the drive, and when they got to work it booted up and Carter introduced himself as Max Headroom.
This is Max Headroom.
It took around 4 hours to put on the prosthetics. We can see here the beginning stages of them sculpting the mouth and jaw section. And then we have the forehead and hair. And this is them blending the top and bottom pieces together and then gluing the hair on it. The body was 2 parts of fiberglass that they screwed together. That part sounds terrifying. And here we can see him complete his metamorphosis into a YouTuber. He really does look like a prototype of a YouTuber. The date is November 22nd, 1987, and Dan Roan is recapping the Bears' victory over the Detroit Lions on Channel 9's 9 o'clock news.
Then they scored again at the Lions 31. Wayne Larrabee called it like this on WGN Radio.
2-yard line, and McMahon back to throw. Dumps it up the middle, wide open McKinnon. Cutting left to the 20, to the 15, to the 10, to the 5. Touchdown!
McMahon and McKinnon, 14-0 Bears, then the defense.
People at home watching the news are celebrating the victory when suddenly the signal begins to stutter and glitch. They become confused and disoriented. They wonder what's going on, so they get up to go adjust their TV antennas and try to fix it. Technicians in the studio of WGN TV were caught off guard and stared in disbelief as this hijacker dressed as Max Headroom bounced around on TV. It went on for about 11 seconds before one of the technicians snapped out of confusion and switched to uplink frequencies, putting Dan back on TV. During the time, the way local TV ended up on air was by broadcasting microwave transmissions to antennas at the top of the tallest buildings for that city. Hence the old term for TV being on air. and from there they would be projected to at-home TV antennas around the city. Federal officials were quickly called to investigate because hijacking the broadcast signal, especially the news, had recently been made a federal crime. They started checking inside the building of WGN but turned up nothing. It made sense it would be someone from within the network because getting access to broadcasting equipment wasn't necessarily easy. The viewers of Channel 9 are left in shock, and while the studio tries to figure out what happened, our hijacker is gearing up for his next attack. A couple hours go by, it's 11:15 p.m., and while Channel 11 PBS was airing an episode of Doctor Who called The Hour of Feigned Rock, if you're wondering what he was holding, it's what I now like to refer to as a marital aid, a term I learned when I was researching this event. And if you're still confused, it was a rubber penis. He also had a metal panel spinning behind him that he was using to imitate the show's AI-generated background. The hijacker was also poking fun at some of the Max Headroom bits. He called out "Catch the Wave," which was a new Coke slogan, and while he was saying that, he was holding up a Pepsi can. He was humming the theme song to the cartoon Clutch Cargo, which was a cartoon that was exclusive to the TV network. And then we have my favorite part.
Oh, I just made a giant masterpiece for all the greatest world newspaper nerds.
I like that he knew he was creating a headline story for the newspapers, a story that's still being talked about today. He was mocking Chicago's news and television establishment and got away with it. And as for the iconic ending, what else can be said?
As far as I can tell, a massive electric shock. He died instantly.
I like to think they might have purposely timed up their tape to match up with the Doctor Who ending. If you're wondering how they knew that episode was going to be airing at that time, back in those days they had TV guides and it had a list of all the TV shows and movies that would be playing on a bi-weekly basis. This hacker was also the original troll. He was trolling using broadcast signals. He laid the foundation for future trolls, and I'm not sure anyone has topped him yet. I mean, thousands of viewers fell victim to his prank on live TV. People began calling into the WGN and WTTW station confused and upset.
It annoyed some viewers.
No, I just thought it would be just a slight mess up, but that in the middle of the tape, it's going to be... We're going to have to tape over it.
And some others found it funny.
Well, some thought it was a lot of fun. So what did you think about the whole thing?
Very, very funny.
This really did upset most people, though. You don't interrupt America's TV time.
Somebody wants to get attention, what do? They go break into a television broadcast. Just to get attention, like throwing a brick through your window, so to speak.
Okay.
It's not too bright, really.
Some officials found the event amusing, but the FCC did not. They're responsible for regulating America's airwaves, and they were starting a witch hunt, or a troll hunt. The FBI Chicago field office got involved, and the FCC spokesman, Phil Bradford, issued a warning to scare anyone who would be offenders.
I'd like to inform anybody involved in this kind of thing that there's a maximum penalty of $100,000, 1 year in jail, or both.
The engineer said that the equipment was sophisticated and unattainable for a regular person, but years later in a new interview it was said that wasn't exactly true. Communication experts were starting to get worried because this wasn't the first hijacking. It was only a year and a half earlier, on April 27, 1986, that a man going by Captain Midnight executed America's first known broadcast signal intrusion. That night, HBO was airing The Falcon and the Snowman. When a little past midnight, the movie was interrupted. The captain was upset with HBO's recent price hike to $12.95. That would be around $37.24 today for a streaming service. Could you imagine paying $37 for HBO Max right now, or Netflix, or any of those? HBO executives refused to publicly discuss the incident, and at this time people in the industry were viewing this hack as a dark future for broadcasting. The reason all these people in the industry were getting concerned is they wanted to know what it meant for the country's satellite infrastructure. It was almost like a form of terrorism to them, and HBO wasn't going to acknowledge it.
Yourself No, we don't negotiate with terrorists.
The FCC quickly found the hacker. He was a satellite technician named John McDougall. The one mistake that led to John being caught was the text font that he used. It was the same font his employer, Central Florida Teleport, a satellite uplink company, used. It's always the small details that will end up getting you caught. In September 1987, Playboy TV was interrupted by a zealot, who was broadcasting radical messages, telling viewers to repent and find Jesus. Man, I wish we had the interviews of those people. They were just trying to enjoy their night, trying to have Hugh Hefner show them some boobies whenever they get these messages, tell them to repent and go find Jesus. I think that company that had the Jesus feet washing ad on the big game should have that put up on some hub videos. When trying to find the Max Headroom imposter, the FCC did not have much to go on. The FBI just told them to focus on the possible location, observe the background of the video, narrow it down to where the signal came from. The background of the video consisted of only a rotating piece of metal. So where did the signal come from? The culprits had to get their signal to overpower the microwaves of the studio's STL, which is a studio transmitter link. The frequency would have been vulnerable and not hard to find because it was being sent to two locations, the John Hancock Building and Sears Tower. The transmission equipment of our intruders would have only needed to be placed at a high enough location between the two studios and their transmitters. This would have either had to have been on the north side or the northwest side of Chicago. That's due to the locations of where the John Hancock Building and Sears Tower is. From there, they could shoot their microwave frequencies and override the studio's signal. Their signal would have been strong enough to overpower the studios because of the difference in distance that the signals were traveling. I mentioned earlier that there was an interview doubting the culprits use expensive and hard to get equipment. That interview was with Dr. Michael Marcus, Assistant Bureau Chief in the FCC's Field Operations Bureau. He said the equipment didn't need to be costly or even very large. New, the gear might have costed $10,000, but it would have been available used on the amateur radio market. All they would have needed is a dish antenna, but if they were close enough, they could use a DirecTV size antenna. The FBI was working on the videotape. They were making photographic prints from it and enhancing frames on a broadcast quality U-matic video cassette tape copy. The ability to enhance videos this way was still a limited technology, practically only available to an organization like the FBI. They were hyper-focused on the upper right-hand quadrant. The goal was to try and get a better visual of the second person in the tape. The case was beginning to reach a dead end, and while the FBI was dissecting the videotape, Marcus and other FCC agents were looking around north and northwest sides of Chicago. They were targeting warehouse buildings that had metal roll-down doors, and eventually they did get a strong lead that pointed to a potential suspect. This suspect worked at a warehouse that for some reason Marcus felt may have been used in the video. That lead though did turn into a dead end because they had no probable cause and no warrant to search the warehouse, just a suspicion. And to me it doesn't even look like a metal roll-down door. I mean, it's obviously not. It just looks like a piece of scrap metal that's mounted to a rotating head on a stand. And that could have been set up literally anywhere. Eventually, the resources and manpower to continue the investigation dried up, and the FCC investigator had no interest in pursuing it any further. Going around knocking on doors wasn't something that the FCC Chicago division really did. And Marcus, the assistant chief of the FCC, he basically called the lead investigator of the Chicago division a pussy because of this. Marcus told him that he needed to get out there and pound on doors to find any leads, and he wasn't about to do it. Marcus said that he was too timid to do any real investigating. Now Marcus had called it quits and went back to DC. There wasn't a push to solve the case because nobody was hurt and the FBI wasn't interested in pursuing the nerds behind this. At the end of the day, it was just a prank. A prank that hurt the ego of the FCC, and the FBI told them that they could pursue it if they wanted to. Today, it still remains a mystery of who was under the Max Headroom mask. Even after the statute of limitation ended in 1993, still no one came forward or even said, "Hey, I know who did it." Still, there is some speculation of who might have done this. 2 days after the incident, we had our first clue. Someone going by the name of the Chameleon posted on Chicago's bulletin board system. The bulletin board system was sort of like a forum website that people used before the internet we have today. And on this bulletin board system, he was detailing what I was talking about earlier, the type of equipment used, how it was used, the knowledge needed. It's likely this person was either involved to some extent or knew the group of people who did it. It was only 2 days later that he posted about it, which is pretty suspicious. This led to a couple of theories of who is responsible, and we can debunk one of them pretty quick. This is the most interesting theory, and it's also probably my favorite because I was a young kid on YouTube whenever his videos were popular. The theory evolves around performance artist and musician Eric Fournier. Eric was the creator of the nightmarish and unsettling YouTube series Shane St. John. Shane St. John, also known as do the hand thing.
I heard you're doing the hand thing today. God, what is that?
Those early days of YouTube were just a different time. I love them so much. Just a culture of internet dwellers, and we were in our own little bubble. The correlation people were making between Eric and Max Headroom was the style and the humor of the video. They were pretty similar, but it's still a bit of a reach. A fun speculation though. At the time, Eric lived in Bloomington, Indiana, not far from Chicago, and played in a punk rock band called the Blood Farmers. There was a rumor that he wanted exposure for the band's music videos and he was going to broadcast one of them. However, he ditched the idea at the last moment because he was afraid he would be identified, so instead he broadcasted one of his performances, Max Headroom. At least that's a theory. It was quickly dismissed by a former band member of Eric. He said they never made any music videos and Eric didn't know anything about video editing or broadcasting. At that time, he later went on to do YouTube videos, but the band members talking about at that current time, Eric didn't know anything about video editing or broadcasting. Another friend of Eric said that he would have found the rumor hilarious, but that there was no way it was him. Sadly, we'll never know Eric's true opinion on the rumor because he passed away in 2010. The second theory is a little more promising, and it was proposed by computer programmer Bowie Pogue on Reddit in 2013. He lived in Chicago at the time and he was only 13. He was hanging around the local BBSs, which is the bulletin board systems, with a loose group of hackers. Now, Bowie made a point that there was a big difference between today's geek and 1980s geek. He said in the 80s they were more isolated socially than kids today, and Bowie was like a little brother on the scene. He started hanging around some of the older hackers and was accepted into their small gatherings. These gatherings were a social event where bulletin board members got together in real life to discuss whatever was going on in the scene at the time and meet face to face. It was sort of like a LAN party. At one of these parties in 1987, he met a man he calls Jay. He described Jay as being a small and peculiar man in his 30s. He lived in an apartment with his older brother, who Bowie referred to as Kay, and his brother's girlfriend. Now, they were just a bunch of tech nerds that lived together, and Bowie described the apartment as being littered with computers, cables, and equipment. Now, fast forward to November 22nd, 1987. Bowie went to a small gathering that took place at the brother's apartment. The oldest brother was surrounded by 3 or 4 people, and Bowie overheard them discussing something big. Later that night, the group was hanging out at Pizza Hut when Bowie decided to ask them what they meant by big, and all they said to him was, "Just watch Channel 11 tonight." Now the thing is, he was told this the same night as the Max Headroom intrusion and didn't think to say anything about it for 25 years, which is pretty suspicious. It makes his story seem like bullshit and he was called out on Reddit for it. I mean, of course he was called out. It's Reddit. It's probably the first thing they did. It's probably the #1 comment on this post. Now he even knew it was pretty questionable, and in 2013 he was asked to do an interview. To back up his claims in the interview, he ended up reaching out to the brothers via Facebook, which I think is pretty interesting because that means the brothers were still around, they weren't made up, and he was able to find them. However, he didn't hear back from them, so he ended up sending out letters via certified mail and still nothing. Which means that, yeah, he did go and find their address, so they are real people, they do exist. But it was obvious the brothers didn't want to be reached for comment, and he speculated it was probably due more to social awkwardness than being afraid of the law. Bowie's claims have been called out as being a hoax, but fellow Redditors came to his side. Redditors came to his defense, saying that they knew the brothers and that his theory was credible. However, if you wanted to nitpick, that might not mean very much. He could have just made fake accounts and went on there and supported his own claims. He did call the brothers J and K in his post, which got me thinking, is it a clue that he's just kidding? People who have spent time investigating this mystery don't buy into Bowie's story and say that the imposter is most likely connected to the WGN network in some way. It seems to be a popular theory among people who have investigated this mystery that it was an employee who had some type of engineering experience within the studio, someone who knew broadcasting techniques and how the equipment worked. There's also all the references to WGN sport reporter Chuck Swirsky, the Tribune, and Clutch Cargo, all WGN properties, which backs up this popular theory that it was an employee from within the studio. The greatest broadcasting hack of all time still goes unsolved, almost 40 years later, and still no one has come forward with any solid evidence. So who do you think did it? Or maybe you even know who did it. Leave a comment down below telling me what you think.